Welcome to Mystic Sleep Tales, a place where gentle stories, quiet narration, and calm atmospheres help you drift softly into rest. Before we begin tonight's tale, I would love to know where you are listening from this evening. If you feel so inclined, you might leave a word in the comments below. It is always lovely to see our little community stretching quietly across the world. Now, it is time to settle in. Find your most comfortable position, whether that be tucked beneath your covers or resting in your favorite chair. Let your body grow heavy. Let the pillow receive the full weight of your head. Close your eyes if you wish, or let them rest softly, half-lidded upon nothing in particular. Take a slow, deep breath in through your nose. And as you release it, imagine the whole of your day dissolving like mist from a morning field. There is nothing you need to do now, nothing you need to remember, nothing at all that requires your attention. Only this voice, only this gentle story, only the quiet and the dark and the kindness of rest. Let your shoulders fall. Let your jaw unclench. Notice the places where your body meets the surface beneath you, and allow yourself to sink a little deeper. Every breath you take carries you further from the noise of the waking world and closer to a place of deep, unhurried stillness. You are safe here. You are welcome. And when you are ready, we shall begin. Imagine, if you will, that you are standing upon a narrow lane somewhere in a modest quarter of an English town, sometime late in the reign of good Queen Victoria. The year does not matter very much, nor the town, though you might picture it as one of those quiet places that sits between the larger cities, a town with a market square and a church tower and a few streets of shops, where everybody knows the name of the baker and the cobbler and the man who mends the clocks. The evening has drawn itself around the rooftops like a shawl, a soft and deepening gray that is neither quite dusk nor quite night, but that gentle, indeterminate hour when a lamplighter has only just begun his rounds and the last of the day's commerce is folding itself away behind shuttered windows and drawn curtains. The air is cool and faintly damp, carrying upon it the distant smell of coal smoke from household chimneys, and beneath that, the subtler perfume of wet stone and old brick. You can hear, if you listen carefully, the slow drip of recent rain from a gutter somewhere above, and the faraway sound of a horse and cart making its unhurried way along a cobbled road. But these sounds are distant things, belonging to the world at large, and they do not concern you now. Before you stand a narrow shop front, set slightly back from the pavement beneath a shallow stone lintel. The door is of dark wood, solid and plain, with a brass handle worn to a dull gleam by the passage of many hands over many years. Above the door, painted in careful letters upon a board that is weathered to the color of old tea, you could just make out the words that read something along the lines of Jasper Motley, stair runner fitter and carpet layer, established 1853. The paint has faded gently, and in places the lettering has been touched up with a slightly different shade, so that the sign itself tells a quiet story of time and continued purpose. There is a single window beside the door, its glass divided into small panes by thin wooden bars, and through it you can see the warm, amber glow of a lamp burning within. The light is not bright, not in the way that a modern light might flood a room, but rather it is a living, breathing kind of illumination, an oil lamp with its wick turned low, casting a circle of gold that softens everything it touches and leaves the corners of the room to shadow and suggestion. It is the sort of light that invites you in, that promises warmth and shelter from the gathering dark outside. And so you step forward gently and you push open the door. The first thing you notice is the smell. It is a rich and layered thing, not unpleasant, but deeply particular to this place. There is the warm, slightly oily scent of wool, a great deal of wool, the sort of smell that comes from many rolled carpets standing together in close quarters. Beneath it, there is the fainter note of jute backing, earthy and dry, and somewhere underneath all of that, the quiet old smell of wood shavings and brass polish and the paraffin from the lamp. These scents mingle together in the still air of the workshop, and they form something that is almost like a flavor, a taste of honest labor and patient craft that has seeped into the very walls of the place over the long years of its existence. The workshop is not large. It is perhaps the size of a modest parlor, with a low ceiling supported by darkened beams and walls of bare plaster that have been painted at some point in the past, a color that might once have been cream, but has since mellowed to the shade of old parchment. The floor is of wooden boards, well swept but marked with the faint traces of use, small indentations here and there where heavy rolls of carpet have been set down, and the occasional pale scuff where a brass rod has been laid aside in haste. Along the far wall, stacked in neat and orderly rows, are the rolled carpets themselves. They are the true inhabitants of this room, these patient cylinders of fabric, each one standing upright like a silent sentinel, each one wrapped in its own quiet dignity. Some are thick and heavy, their edges showing the dense, cut pile of a good Wilton, deep reds and forest greens, and that particular shade of midnight blue that the Victorians favored so greatly for their better rooms. Others are lighter, the looped texture of a Brussels weave visible where the end of the roll shows its face. And here the patterns are more intricate, small florals and geometric borders picked out in colors that glow softly in the lamplight, the madder reds and indigo blues that speak of natural dyes and traditional craft. There are narrower rolls as well, the stair runners themselves, and these are gathered in a separate group near the center of the room, some leaning against one another in companionable clusters, others laid upon a long, low trestle that serves as the main work surface. One such runner has been partially unrolled across this trestle, and its pattern is revealed in the lamplight like a garden scene through a golden window. It is a Persian-style design, the sort that was so popular in homes of the middling sort during those years, with a central medallion of deep crimson surrounded by scrolling tendrils and small, precise flowers in cream and soft gold, all set upon a ground of the darkest blue. The colors seem to breathe in the flickering light, deepening and brightening in gentle alternation, as though the carpet itself were dreaming. And there, beside the trestle, bent quietly over his work, is the man himself. Mr. Jasper Motley is not a young man, nor is he particularly old. He is perhaps in his middle 50s, though the lamplight makes it difficult to say with any certainty, for it smooths the lines of his face and casts his features in a warm and forgiving glow. He is of medium height and sturdy build, the sort of frame that comes not from deliberate exercise, but from a lifetime of kneeling on staircases and lifting heavy rolls of carpet and crawling along hallway floors with tacks between his teeth. His hands are large and capable, the fingers thick but surprisingly dexterous, and they are marked with the small nicks and calluses that are the signatures of his trade. His hair, What remains of it is the color of iron filings cropped close to his head, and his eyebrows are heavy and expressive, giving his face a look of perpetual thoughtfulness even when he is engaged in the most routine of tasks. He wears a plain waistcoat of dark gray wool over a collarless shirt that was once white but has softened through many washings to the color of weak tea. His sleeves are rolled to the elbow, revealing forearms that are tanned and sinewy, and around his waist he wears a canvas apron with several pockets, from which protrude the handles of various tools. A wooden rule, a pair of heavy shears, a stub of tailor's chalk. There is a small tin of brass tacks on the trestle beside him, and next to that, a length of measuring tape coiled like a sleeping serpent. At this moment, Mr. Motley is doing something very simple and very quiet. He is measuring the edge of the partially unrolled runner, drawing his tape along the selvage with the care and concentration of a man who has performed this action 10,000 times and yet still finds it worthy of his full attention. He does not rush. He does not frown. He simply moves the tape, notes the measurement with a small nod of satisfaction, and then marks the spot with a tiny nick of chalk upon the fabric's underside. The chalk makes a soft, dry sound against the backing, barely audible, like the scratch of a mouse's claw upon a skirting board. Outside, the evening continues to deepen. You can hear very faintly the sound of the lamplighter's pole tapping against a street lamp somewhere in the lane, followed by the gentle hiss and flare of gas catching light. Then silence again, or near enough to silence, broken only by the quiet sounds of the workshop, the slow, steady breathing of the man at his trestle, the occasional rustle of fabric as he adjusts the runner's position, and the soft, constant whisper of the oil lamp's flame behind its glass chimney. The lamp itself is a handsome thing, though not ostentatious. It is a duplex burner of the type that became so popular in the latter decades of the century, with two wicks burning side by side behind a clear glass chimney, and above that a shade of frosted glass, slightly bell-shaped, that diffuses the light into a warm and even glow. The brass base has been polished many times, but never to excess, so that it carries a patina of honest use, and the reservoir is filled with the pale, clear paraffin that had become so readily available and affordable since the discovery of the great oil fields across the Atlantic. The lamp sits upon a small shelf fixed to the wall beside the trestle, at just the right height to illuminate the work's surface without casting a shadow from Mr. Motley's hands, and its steady, golden light is the heart of the room, the still center around which all the quiet activity of the workshop gently turns. Mr. Motley finishes his measurement and straightens slowly, pressing one hand to the small of his back in the way that men of his trade so often do, a gesture born not of pain exactly, but of the habitual awareness of muscles that have spent many years in kneeling and bending and reaching. He looks down at the runner spread before him, and his expression is one of quiet satisfaction, the expression of a man who knows his materials and respects them, who understands that a good carpet is not merely a covering for a staircase, but a thing of genuine craft, something made with skill and intention and a care that deserves to be honored in the laying of it. He reaches into the pocket of his apron and withdraws a small brass rod, perhaps 18 inches in length, with a rounded finial at each end shaped like an acorn. He holds it up to the lamplight and turns it slowly between his fingers, examining it with the attentive eye of a man who can detect, by touch as much as by sight, any imperfection in the metal, Any roughness or burr that might catch upon the carpet or scratch the polished wood of staircase. The brass catches the lamplight and sends a small, warm gleam across the ceiling, a brief and beautiful thing, like a coin of gold thrown upon still water. Then he sets the rod down upon the trestle, gently, beside a row of identical rods that he has already inspected, and reaches for the next. This is the rhythm of his evening. This is the gentle, unhurried pattern of his work. He is preparing a set of stair rods and a length of runner for a house in the better part town, a home belonging to a family of modest prosperity, the sort of household that would have a Brussels runner on the main staircase and perhaps a Wilton in the drawing room, with brass rods of the acorn finial type, because they are handsome without being extravagant, respectable without straying into ostentation. It is the kind of commission that Mr. Motley receives most frequently, and it is the kind he enjoys most thoroughly, for it allows him to exercise his craft without the pressure of grand expectations or impossible deadlines. He picks up another rod, holds it to the light, turns it, nods, and sets it down. The action takes perhaps 15 seconds, and in those 15 seconds the whole world beyond the workshop's walls might as well have ceased to exist. There is only the rod and the light and the quiet satisfaction of a task performed with attention and care. The rolled carpets along the far wall stand in their patient rows, and if you look at them long enough in this gentle light, they begin to seem almost like companions, like quiet friends gathered in a room, each one carrying within itself a hidden world of color and pattern, a garden or a geometric landscape or a field of flowers that will only be revealed when the carpet is unrolled and laid upon the stairs of some household, brought to life beneath the tread of daily feet. But for now they are content to wait, wrapped in their own stillness, their colors folded inward, their patterns dreaming in the dark. There is a small fireplace set into the wall to the right of the trestle, and in it a very modest fire is burning, more embers than flame, just enough to take the edge off the evening chill without raising the temperature of the room to a point that might be unkind to the wool. For wool is a temperamental material, as Mr. Motley well knows, and it does not care for extremes of heat or damp. A room too warm will cause the fibers to dry and become brittle, while a room too cold may encourage the damp to settle into the rolls and bring with it the unwelcome attentions of moth and mildew. And so the fire is kept low, a gentle companion rather than a roaring presence, its embers glowing in shades of deep orange and soft ash gray, and the warmth it offers is of the most modest and courteous kind. Above the fireplace, on a narrow mantel shelf, there are a few objects arranged with the unconscious orderliness of long habit. A small clock, its face round and plain, its ticking so soft and regular that it has long since become part of the room's silence rather than an interruption of it. A tin of brass polish, its lid slightly askew. A clay pipe, unlit, resting in a chipped saucer. And a single photograph in a small wooden frame, the image faded to the color of weak sepia, showing a woman with her hair pinned up and a small child upon her lap, both of them looking at the camera with the solemn, patient expressions that the long exposure times of the era demanded. Mr. Motley does not look at the photograph now, for he has looked at it many thousands of times before, and its presence upon the mantel shelf is as familiar and as comforting to him as the weight of the shears in his apron pocket or the smell of wool in the air. It is simply there, a quiet anchor, a reminder of the life that exists beyond the workshop's walls, the life to which you will return when his evening's work is done. But that time is not yet. There are still rods to inspect, measurements to take, and the slow, contemplative work of preparation to attend to. And so Mr. Motley returns to his trestle, draws the measuring tape once more along the edge of the runner, and continues. The evening outside has settled fully now into that deep, soft darkness that comes to English towns on autumn nights when the clouds are low and the air is still. The sound of the rain has ceased, leaving behind only the slow, intermittent drip from the gutters and the occasional distant bark of a dog somewhere in the neighboring streets. The lamplighter has finished his rounds and gone home, and the gas lamps along the lane cast their small, faithful pools of light upon the wet cobbles, each one a tiny island of amber in the surrounding dark. Inside the workshop, the world is smaller and warmer and infinitely more contained. The lamp burns steadily, the fire glows softly, and Mr. Motley works on, his movements as regular and as soothing as the ticking of the clock upon the mantel. He has taken up his shears now, and he is trimming a very small excess of fabric from the edge of the runner, a matter of perhaps 1/4 of an inch, the sort of adjustment that would be invisible to the untrained eye, but that Mr. Motley considers essential to the proper laying of the carpet. The shears are large and heavy, their blades darkened with years of use, but in his hands they move with a surprising delicacy, cutting through the dense wool with a soft, satisfying sound, a slow, continuous whisper that is like the sound of a blade drawn through heavy silk. He cuts a few inches, pauses, examines the edge, and cuts again. The trimmings fall to the floor in small, curling wisps of fiber, dark red and blue and gold, and they gather at his feet like autumn leaves, adding their own small contribution to the quiet landscape of the workshop floor. He will sweep them up later, when his work is done, gathering them into a small pile with the worn bristle broom that leans against the wall beside the door. But for now they are permitted to rest where they fall, soft and harmless and faintly beautiful in the lamplight. The sounds of the workshop are few and gentle, and they repeat themselves in patterns that are deeply calming. The soft clip of the shears, the dry scratch of chalk upon backing, the almost inaudible rustle of wool against wool as a roll is adjusted, or a length of runner is drawn a few inches further along the trestle. The steady, patient ticking of the clock, the low, continuous murmur of the lamp. And beneath all of these, like a bass note beneath a melody, the deep and abiding silence of the room itself, a silence that is not empty but full, rich with the accumulated stillness of many quiet evenings spent in just this way, in just this place, doing just this kind of careful, unhurried work. Mr. Motley sets down the shears and picks up the measuring tape once more. He draws it along the length of the runner that he has just trimmed, checking that the width is consistent from one end to the other, and he does this with the slow, thorough attention of a man who knows that a stair runner, which is even a fraction of an inch wider at one end than the other, will never sit properly upon the stairs, will never present that clean, symmetrical line between the carpet's edge and the exposed wood of the tread that is the mark of a well-fitted staircase. The tape whispers softly against the fabric as he draws it, and his lips move very slightly as he counts the inches, though no sound escapes them. He nods. The measurement is correct. He marks the spot with another small nick of chalk, and then he stands back, folding his arms gently across his chest, and regards the runner with the quiet, contemplative gaze of a man admiring something well-made. The pattern gleams softly in the lamplight, the deep reds and blues and golds of the design seeming to glow with an inner warmth. And for a moment the workshop is very still and very peaceful, and the only sound is the ticking of the clock and the gentle breathing of the lamp. Motley unfolds his arms after a time and reaches for the tin of brass tacks that sits beside the row of inspected rods. He lifts the lid with his thumb, and the small, bright tacks within catch the lamplight like a handful of tiny stars gathered in a shallow dish. He does not need tacks this evening. Not for the work he is doing now, for the tacking will come later, when the runner is carried to the house and fitted upon the staircase itself. But he likes to check his supply, to run his fingers lightly through the small metal points and satisfy himself that he has enough for the job at hand, that they are clean and straight and free of rust. It is the kind of quiet, preparatory habit that gives shape to his evenings, a ritual of readiness that is as much about the pleasure of the doing as about any practical necessity. The tacks make a soft, musical sound as his fingers stir them, a faint tinkling like distant bells heard through a closed window, and then he replaces the lid and sets the tin back upon the trestle. He reaches next for a small block of beeswax, amber-colored and smooth, which he keeps in a square of clean linen in the pocket of his apron. He draws the wax slowly along the shaft of one of the brass rods, turning the rod as he goes, coating it with the thinnest possible layer of the warm, golden substance. This is something he learned long ago from the man who taught him his trade, old Mr. Coombs of Tewkesbury, who maintained that a brass rod treated with beeswax would slide more smoothly into its brackets and would resist tarnishing for a good deal longer than an untreated one. Whether this was true in any scientific sense, Mr. Motley could not say with certainty, but he had continued the practice all his working life, and the quiet, meditative act of waxing the rods had become one of the small pleasures of his craft, a thing he looked forward to on these long, still evenings in the workshop. The beeswax has a scent of its own, faint but sweet, and it mingles with the wool smell and the paraffin smell and the old wood smell of the room to create something that is entirely particular to this place, a fragrance that Mr. Motley himself has long since ceased to notice, but that a visitor would recognize at once as the smell of a working man's sanctuary, a place where honest materials are handled with respect and care. He finishes waxing the rod and holds it up to the light once more. The beeswax has given the brass a slightly deeper luster, a richness that is not quite a shine, but something softer and more dignified, the kind of glow that old brass acquires in a well-kept house, where it is polished regularly, but never harshly, where the patina of years is regarded not as a deficiency, but as a mark of character. He sets the rod down with the others and picks up the next, and the process begins again, smooth and unhurried, the block of wax moving along the metal with a sound so faint that it is barely a sound at all, more a sensation than a noise, a thing felt rather than heard. Outside, the autumn night continues its slow, quiet business. A church clock somewhere in the middle distance strikes the hour, and the sound reaches the workshop as a series of deep, muffled tones, softened by distance and by the thickness of the walls, arriving like the memory of a sound rather than the sound itself. Mr. Motley pauses in his work, not to count the strokes, for he knows what hour it is without needing to be told, but simply to listen, to let the sound pass through the room and settle into the silence that follows it. The clock on the mantel shelf ticks on, indifferent to its grander cousin in the church tower, maintaining its own modest accounting of the minutes with the steadfast reliability of a thing that knows its place and is content with it. The fire in the grate has burned lower still, and the embers now glow with a deep, pulsing warmth that is more felt than seen, a heat that rises from the hearth in slow, gentle waves and mingles with the cool air near the floor to create a temperature that is perfectly suited to the storage of wool and the comfort of a working man. Mr. Motley considers, for a moment, whether to add another piece of coal, but decides against it. The evening is not so cold as to require it, and besides, there is something deeply pleasant about the way the embers look at this stage of their burning, when the fierce orange has faded to a softer, darker glow, the color of old garnets or of the very darkest port wine, and the ash that surrounds them has taken on that pale, powdery gray that is almost lavender in certain lights. He returns to his waxing, and the room settles once more into its gentle rhythm. The lamplight holds steady, the clock ticks, the embers glow, and the rolled carpets along the walls stand in their patient vigil, each one a quiet promise of color and pattern and warmth waiting to be fulfilled. If you were to close your eyes in this room, you would hear only the most tender of sounds, the faint scrape of wax upon brass, the soft exhalation of the lamp, the distant, almost imaginary drip of water from the gutter outside, and beneath it all, the deep, breathing silence of a space that has been shaped by years of quiet, purposeful work. Mr. Motley finishes the last of the rods and lays it carefully beside its companions. There are 14 in all, enough for a staircase of 13 steps with one spare. For Mr. Motley is a man who believes in preparedness, who has learned through long experience that it is better to arrive at a house with one rod too many than to find oneself one rod short and be forced to make a second journey. He regards the row of rods with the same quiet pleasure that a gardener might feel upon surveying a bed of newly planted bulbs, knowing that the real beauty of the thing is still to come, still hidden beneath the surface, but that the groundwork has been well and truly laid. He draws a cloth from beneath the trestle, a piece of old flannel, soft and pale, and he lays it gently over the row of rods, covering them against the dust that might settle during the night. Then he turns his attention back to the runner itself, which is still spread across the trestle in its quiet splendor, its pattern of crimson and blue and gold glowing softly in the lamplight like a window of stained glass seen from within a darkened church. He runs his hand along the surface of the carpet, slowly, his palm flat, his fingers spread, feeling the texture of the pile beneath his touch. This is something he does with every runner and every carpet that passes through his workshop, and it is a gesture that is part professional assessment and part something else entirely, something closer to affection, a craftsman's instinctive response to a material that he understands and admires. The wool is dense and closely cut, the pile standing upright and even, and beneath his hand it feels firm but yielding, like a meadow of very short, very thick grass. He can feel the slight ridges where the colors change, the almost imperceptible difference in texture between the dyed and undyed portions of the fiber, and these small variations tell him things about the carpet's quality, its provenance, the care with which it was made, that no amount of looking alone could convey. This particular runner, he knows, was manufactured at one of the mills in Kidderminster, that great center of the English carpet trade, where the looms had been turning out Brussels and Wilton weaves for the better part of a century. The wool had likely come from the uplands of Shropshire or the Welsh borders, shorn in the spring and washed and carded and spun into yarn before being sent to the dye houses, where it would have been immersed in great vats of color. The deep crimson of the central medallion would have been achieved with madder root, that ancient and reliable source of red that had served dyers for centuries, though Mr. Motley was aware that the newer aniline dyes, derived from coal tar, were increasingly common in the trade and produced colors of a brightness and intensity that the old vegetable dyes could not always match. He preferred the older colors himself, finding in them a depth and warmth that the chemical alternatives sometimes lacked, a quality of light within the fiber that seemed to come from the wool itself rather than from something applied to its surface. But these were thoughts for another time, idle musings of the sort that a man in a quiet workshop might entertain on a still evening when his hands are busy and his mind is free to wander where it will. For now, the important thing was the carpet's condition, and in this regard Mr. Motley was entirely satisfied. The pile was even, the backing was firm, the selvage was clean and straight, and the pattern was well registered, meaning that the colors lined up precisely where they should, with no blurring or misalignment at the borders of the design. It was, in short, a good piece of work, and it deserved to be laid with all the skill and care that Mr. Motley could bring to the task. He begins now to roll the runner back upon itself, working from the far end of the trestle toward the near, his hands moving with the slow, deliberate rhythm of a man who has rolled 1,000 carpets and knows exactly how much tension to apply, how tightly to wind the fabric so that it holds its shape without compressing the pile, how to keep the edges aligned so that the roll is neat and even from one end to the other. It is a task that looks simple, but is not, for a carpet rolled too tightly will develop creases that are difficult to remove, while one rolled too loosely will sag and shift and become misshapen. Mr. Motley's hands find the balance instinctively, and the runner coils itself beneath his palms with a soft, continuous sound, a gentle shushing, like the sound of a hand drawn slowly across a bedsheet. When the rolling is complete, he ties the carpet with 2 lengths of cotton tape, one near each end, securing the roll with neat, unhurried knots that are firm enough to hold but easy enough to undo when the time comes. Then he lifts the roll, cradling it across his forearms with the care of a man carrying something precious, and he carries it to the far wall, where he sets it upright among its fellows, leaning it against the others in the group of stair runners that are awaiting delivery. The roll settles into place with a soft, padded sound, fabric meeting fabric, and then it is still, standing quietly in its appointed place, ready and waiting. Mr. Motley steps back and looks at the workshop with the slow, surveying gaze of a man taking stock of his domain at the end of a period of work. The trestle is clear now, save for the tin of tacks, the measuring tape, the stub of chalk, and the flannel-covered row of brass rods. The floor is scattered with the small wisps of trimmed fiber that fell during his cutting, and these he now attends to, taking up the broom from its place beside the door and sweeping them into a small pile with slow, even strokes. The bristles of the broom are worn and soft, and they make a gentle, rhythmic sound against the wooden boards, a sound that is deeply familiar and deeply soothing, the sound of tidying, of putting things to rights, of bringing order to a small corner of the world. He sweeps the fibers into a dustpan and empties them into a wooden box that sits beneath the trestle, a box in which he collects all his carpet trimmings and offcuts, for nothing is wasted in Mr. Motley's workshop. The larger pieces will be saved and used as patches or samples, while the smaller fibers and wisps will be taken home eventually and used as stuffing for a cushion or a draft excluder, or perhaps given to a neighbor who keeps chickens, for wool makes excellent nesting material, being warm and soft and slow to rot. It is a small economy, the kind of careful husbandry that comes naturally to a man of Mr. Motley's generation and station, a man who was raised to believe that every material has a purpose and every scrap has a use, and that wastefulness is a failing not of the purse alone, but of the character. The sweeping done, he sets the broom back in its place and stands for a moment in the center of the room, his hands resting lightly on the front of his apron. The workshop is tidy now, everything in its place, and the lamplight falls across the ordered space with a warmth and softness that seems almost to approve of the neatness, as though the light itself is pleased to have clean surfaces and straight edges to illuminate. The rolled carpets stand in their rows, the brass rods lie beneath their flannel cloth, the trestle is bare and clean, and the floor is swept and clear. It is a scene of quiet completion, of tasks performed and order restored, and there is in it a deep and particular kind of peace. Mr. Motley moves to the small fireplace and lowers himself into the chair that stands beside it, a wooden chair with a curved back and a seat that has been made comfortable by the addition of a flat cushion covered in a fabric of faded green. It is the only chair in the workshop, and it is positioned so that its occupant can see both the trestle and the door, though at this hour, with the work done and the evening far advanced, there is nothing much to see in either direction. He settles into the chair with the slow, grateful ease of a man who has been on his feet for several hours, and he lets out a long, quiet breath that is not quite a sigh, but something very close to it, an exhalation of contentment and mild fatigue that seems to carry with it all the small exertions of the evening. The embers in the grate are very low now, barely more than a faint, ruddy glow beneath a blanket of soft ash, but they still give off a gentle warmth that reaches Mr. Motley's knees and shins and settles there like a kindly hand. He stretches his legs out before him, crossing his ankles, and rests his hands upon the arms of the chair. The lamp continues to burn steadily on its shelf, and the clock continues to tick upon the mantel, and the room is very still and very quiet and very warm. From his chair, Mr. Motley can see the row of rolled carpets along the far wall, their shapes softened by the dim light into columns of muted color, and he regards them with the easy, unfocused gaze of a man whose thoughts are beginning to drift, not toward sleep exactly, but toward that gentle, intermediate state in which the mind loosens its grip upon the details of the immediate world and begins to wander, softly and without purpose, through the broader territories of memory and reflection. He thinks about the house where the runner will be laid, a house he visited last week to take his measurements. It is a terraced house in one of the newer streets on the north side of town, 3 stories tall, with a front door of dark blue paint and a brass letterbox and a boot scraper set into the step. The family is called Pemberton, a husband and wife with 2 young daughters, and they have recently moved from a smaller house nearby, stepping up, as it were, in the quiet, gradual way that families of the respectable working class sometimes did in those years, adding a room here, an improvement there, each small advance a mark of industry and careful saving. The staircase in the Pemberton house is of the standard type, a straight run of 13 steps from the ground floor hallway to the first floor landing, with a simple turn banister and a newel post topped with a plain, rounded cap. The treads are of pine, sanded smooth but unvarnished, and they show the pale, golden color of new wood, for the house has been built only a few years, and the stairs have not yet acquired the darkened patina that comes with age and the daily traffic of feet. Mrs. Pemberton had been very particular about the width of the runner, wanting it to sit precisely in the center of each tread with an even margin of bare wood visible on either side, and Mr. Motley had taken his measurements with extra care, noting down the width of each tread and the depth of each riser in his small leather notebook. For he knew from experience that even in a new house the dimensions could vary slightly from step to step, and that a runner cut to a single uniform measurement might not sit quite true upon every tread. He had also measured for the stair rods, checking the distance between the inner edges of the balusters on each step and recording these figures alongside the tread measurements. The rods would need to be cut to length, of course, for they came from the supplier in standard lengths and had to be trimmed to fit each individual staircase. This cutting he would do tomorrow, using the small hand saw and a metal file that he kept in the wooden tool chest beneath the trestle, and the brass rods would need to be filed smooth at their cut ends and polished before the acorn finials were fitted. It was detailed work, the kind that required patience and a steady hand, and Mr. Motley looked forward to it with the quiet anticipation of a man who finds genuine pleasure in the small, precise tasks of his trade. But that was tomorrow's work. Tonight, there was nothing more to be done, and the luxury of having nothing more to do was itself a kind of pleasure, a permission to sit and be still and let the mind go where it wished. He thinks about the wool. He thinks about the long journey that the fibers of the carpet have made, from the back of sheep on some windswept hillside to the mill floor at Kidderminster, through the washing and the carding and the spinning, through the dyeing vats with their clouds of color, through the great mechanical looms with their clattering jacquard mechanisms, each one punching out the pattern row by row according to the instructions encoded in the cards. And finally to this quiet workshop in this quiet town, where the finished carpet rests in its rolled stillness, waiting to be laid upon the stairs of a family home. It is a long chain of hands and labor, a chain that stretches from the shepherd to the spinner to the dyer to the loom operator to the merchant to the carpet fitter, and Mr. Motley is the last link in it, the man whose task it is to take the finished product and set it in its final place, to ensure that all the skill and effort that have gone into its making are honored in the manner of its laying. It is a responsibility he takes seriously, though he would never say so in such grand terms. He would say simply that he likes to do a good job, that he likes to leave a staircase looking right, and that a carpet well laid is a thing that gives him satisfaction. But beneath these modest words there is something deeper, a craftsman's pride that runs through him like the warped thread through a carpet, holding everything together, giving shape and purpose to the daily work. The clock on the mantel ticks softly onward, and the embers in the grate settle with a faint, papery sound, and the lamp burns on, steady and faithful, casting its golden circle of light across the workshop. Mr. Motley sits in his chair, his eyes half closed, his breathing slow and even, and the quietness of the room is like a living thing, a gentle presence that surrounds him and holds him in its care. He does not think about the morning or the next day's work or of the week ahead. He does not plan or fret or calculate. He simply sits and breathes and lets the stillness of the workshop fill him up, the way water fills a cup, slowly and completely, until there is no room left for anything else. The rolled carpets stand in their silent rows. The brass rods rest beneath their flannel cloth. The floor is clean and swept, and the evening is deep and dark and still outside the window. And everything is as it should be. Everything is in its place, and the world is small and warm and safe. After a time, Mr. Motley opens his eyes and looks about the room with the slow, gentle awareness of a man returning from a distance. He notices things that he noticed before, but that seem, in this moment, to carry a particular quality of beauty or interest, the way the lamplight catches the edge of the trestle and turns the wood to honey, the way the smallest wisps of fiber that escape the broom have gathered in the corners of the room like tiny drifts of colored snow, the way the glass chimney of the lamp seems to glow from within, as though the flame it contains is not a thing of fire, but a thing of liquid gold. He rises from the chair, slowly, pressing his hands against his knees as he stands, and he moves to the trestle, where the flannel cloth lies over the row of brass rods. He lifts the edge of the cloth, just barely, and peers beneath it, as though checking that the rods are still there, still safe, still lying in their neat and orderly line. They are, of course, exactly as he left them, and he lets the cloth fall back into place with a small, satisfied nod. Then he moves to the row of rolled carpets along the wall, and he does something that he does every evening before he leaves the workshop, something that is part habit and part ritual, and part something that he could not easily explain to anyone who is not a carpet fitter. He places his hand upon the nearest roll, gently, the way one might place a hand upon the shoulder of a friend, and he stands there for a moment, feeling the dense, solid weight of the carpet beneath his palm, the cool surface of the wool, the slight give of the fabric as it yields to his touch. He is not checking for damage or defect. He is simply acknowledging the material, paying his respects to it, as it were, saying good night to the silent inhabitants of his workshop in the only language they understand, the language of touch. He moves along the row, placing his hand upon each roll in turn, a brief, gentle contact that lasts no more than a second or two before he moves on to the next. The carpets stand tall and still beneath his touch, and in the dim light, they seem almost to lean toward him, as though grateful for the attention, though of course they do no such thing, being rolls of wool and jute and nothing more. But in the quiet, lamplit world of the workshop, where the boundaries between the practical and the imaginative are softened by the hour and the light, it is not difficult to imagine that these patient cylinders of fabric have something approaching a presence, a dignity of their own that deserves to be recognized. When he has touched the last of the rolls, Mr. Motley steps back and turns once more to survey the room. Everything is in order. Everything is as it should be. The workshop is ready for the night and ready for the morning, and in the space between those two states of readiness, there is this present moment, this gentle, liminal hour in which the work is done and the rest has not yet begun, and the room exists in a state of perfect, undemanding stillness. He moves to the lamp and reaches for the small brass wheel that controls the height of the wicks. He turns it slowly, and the twin flames within the chimney begin to shrink, drawing themselves down into the burner with a soft, yielding sigh, and the light in the room dims accordingly. the golden circle contracting, the shadows creeping in from the corners and the edges, reclaiming the territory that the lamplight had held throughout the evening. The rolled carpets fade from view, their colors retreating into darkness, and the trestle becomes a dim, horizontal shape against the far wall, and the brass rods beneath their cloth are lost entirely to the shadow. But Mr. Motley does not extinguish the lamp completely. He leaves the wicks burning at their lowest setting, just enough to produce a faint, flickering glow that is barely brighter than the embers in the grate, just enough to see by if one were to enter the workshop in the small hours and need to find one's way to the door. It is a cautious man's habit, a small measure of security against the dark, and it gives the room, in its dimmed state, a quality that is deeply intimate and deeply restful, as though the workshop itself has lowered its eyelids and is preparing to sleep. The embers in the grate give a last, soft pulse of warmth, and then they too begin to fade, settling deeper into their bed of ash, their glow dimming from garnet to the faintest, most distant shade of rose. The clock on the mantel ticks on, faithful and unhurried, marking the seconds with its small, reliable voice, and the room grows stiller and quieter and darker with each passing moment, and the rolled carpets stand in their rows like sentinels at their posts, guarding the silence of the night. Mr. Motley moves to the door, his footsteps soft upon the wooden floor, and he pauses there for a moment, one hand upon the brass handle, looking back into the workshop. In the dim light, the room has become a place of shapes and shadows, a landscape of soft edges and muted tones, and the smell of wool and wax and paraffin is stronger than ever in the still, warm air. He stands there for a long moment, taking it in, this small, familiar, deeply loved space, and then he turns the handle and steps through the door into the narrow corridor that leads to the staircase and the rooms above, where his supper and his bed and the quiet continuation of his ordinary, contented life await him. But we shall not follow him there. We shall stay here, in the workshop, in the gentle, fading light, among the rolled carpets and the polished rods and the swept floor and the ticking clock. We shall let the quiet of the room settle around us like a blanket, warm and soft and infinitely kind, and we shall listen to the small sounds of the night as they come and go, the drip of water from the gutter, the distant bark of the dog, the creak of the old timbers as they settle in the cooling air, and beneath it all, the deep, abiding silence of a place that is at peace with itself and with the world. The lamp flickers very gently, and the shadows sway, and the rolled carpets dream their colorful dreams in the dark, and the brass rods rest beneath their cloth, and the trestle stands clean and bare, and the clock ticks on, and on, and on, each tick a small, soft step along the quiet road of the night. And if you listen very carefully, if you let your breathing slow and your thoughts grow still, you might almost hear the wool itself, the thousand fibers of the carpets in their rolls, settling deeper into their own softness, relaxing into the darkness, giving themselves over to the night with the same gentle willingness with which you, too, might now begin to give yourself over to the kindness of sleep. For there is nothing more to be done here. The work is finished, the rods are polished, the runner is trimmed and measured and rolled, and the morning will come in its own good time, bringing with it the quiet pleasures of the next day's tasks, the cutting and the filing and the fitting, the careful, patient work of laying a carpet upon a staircase in a house where a family lives and grows and makes its small, precious way through the world. But all of that is for tomorrow. Tonight, there's only this, the workshop, and the dark, and the deep, sweet quiet, and the slow, steady breathing of the night. The workshop holds its stillness the way a cupped hand holds water, gently and completely, without any effort at all. The lamp, turned down to its lowest ebb, offers only the barest suggestion of light now, a trembling amber thread that outlines the glass chimney and casts the faintest possible glow upon the shelf where it sits, so that the grain of the wood is just barely visible, each line and whorl picked out in the softest gold, like a map drawn in honey upon old paper. The rest of the room has given itself over to the dark, not a frightening dark, not a cold or hostile dark, but the warm, companionable darkness of a room that has been well used and well loved and is now resting, as all things must rest after the labors of the day. The clock upon the mantel shelf continues its quiet work, and in the near total stillness of the room, its ticking seems to have grown gentler still, as though it, too, is aware of the hour and has adjusted its voice accordingly, speaking now in the softest possible whisper, a sound so regular and so familiar that it has become indistinguishable from silence itself. Tick and tick and tick, each one a small, bright bead strung upon the long, dark thread of the night, and between each tick a space of perfect quiet in which nothing at all happens and nothing at all needs to happen, and the world is as still and as patient as the rolled carpets standing in their rows along the wall. If we were to move closer to those carpets now, stepping softly across the swept floor, we might notice things about them that the busier light of the evening had not quite revealed. The way, for instance, that the ends of the rolls, where the pattern of the carpet is visible, have taken on a deeper richness in the dimness, as though the colors have been released by the absence of bright light, and are now free to glow with their own internal warmth. The deep reds seem redder, the blues seem deeper, and the golds and creams that pick out the smaller details of the designs seem to float upon the surface of the fabric like small, luminous clouds upon a darkened sky. It is a trick of the eye, of course, the way that colors appear to intensify when the overall light is low, but in this quiet, dreaming room it feels like something more than optics, something closer to a revelation, as though the carpets are showing their true selves now, that the day is done and the workshop is theirs alone. There is a particular roll near the center of the group that catches the eye, or would catch it, if there were an eye to catch. It is a Wilton, broader and heavier than the stair runners that surround it, and its end shows a pattern of exceptional beauty, a field of the deepest forest green upon which are scattered sprays of flowers and shades of ivory and pale rose and the faintest, most delicate blue, each spray composed with a precision and a naturalism that speaks of the very highest quality of design and manufacture. The flowers are not quite identifiable as any particular species, being those generalized, idealized blooms that the carpet designers of the period favored, partaking equally of the rose and the peony and the camellia without being precisely any one of them. But they are lovely, these imagined flowers, and they rest upon their dark green ground with a lightness and a grace that seems almost impossible for a thing made of wool and woven upon a mechanical loom. This carpet, Mr. Motley knows, is destined for the drawing room of a house rather grander than the Pembertons, a house belonging to a solicitor and his wife on the far side of town, where the streets are wider and the front gardens are deeper and the houses have names as well as numbers. It is a commission that Mr. Motley undertook with particular care, for the solicitor's wife is known to have exacting standards in matters of domestic arrangement, and the drawing room in question has a parquet border around the edge of the floor that will require the carpet to be laid with absolute precision, its edges perfectly aligned with the geometric pattern of the inlaid wood. It will be a demanding job, the kind that requires Mr. Motley to spend a full day on his knees with his stretching tools and his tacks and his keen, unforgiving eye, but it is also the kind of job that gives him the deepest satisfaction, the kind that tests his skill and rewards his patience, and leaves behind it a room that is, in its quiet way, a small monument to the art of the carpet layer. But that, too, is for another day. Tonight, the green Wilton rests in its roll, its flowers folded inward, its beauty hidden and preserved, and it stands among its companions with the same quiet patience that characterizes everything in this room, the patience of materials that have been made with care and are waiting to fulfill their purpose, content in the knowledge that the hands that will lay them are skilled and steady and kind. Near the foot of the carpet rolls on the floor, there is a small basket woven of rushes, and in it are gathered several items that Mr. Motley uses in his daily work, but that are too small or too miscellaneous to be kept in the pockets of his apron. There is a ball of stout twine, its surface slightly fuzzy from use. There is a leather strop, darkened with age, upon which he hones the blade of his trimming knife. There is a small glass bottle, stoppered with a cork, containing a clear liquid that is linseed oil, used for treating the wooden handles of his tools to keep them smooth and free from cracking. And there is a piece of carpet, no larger than a man's handkerchief, cut from the end of some long-ago commission, its pattern too faded and its pile too worn to be of any practical use, but kept nonetheless, for reasons that Mr. Motley himself might not be able to articulate, in a way that people sometimes keep small, useless things because they have become, through long association, a part of the landscape of their lives. The basket sits in its corner, holding its modest collection of objects with the quiet self-sufficiency of a bird's nest, and the lamplight, such as it is, does not quite reach it, so that it exists in a state of gentle obscurity, a small, still life arrangement in the margin of the room, noticed by no one and requiring notice from no one, simply being there, as it has been there for years. A minor but essential part of the workshop's quiet order. The air in the room has cooled slightly since Mr. Motley's departure, for the fire is now quite dead, its embers having faded to a uniform gray, and the warmth that they gave off during the evening has slowly dissipated into the walls and the ceiling and the floor. But the room is not cold. The rolled carpets themselves provide a kind of insulation, their dense, woolen bodies absorbing and retaining heat in the way that has always done, since the first shepherd wrapped himself in a fleece against the Highland wind, and the workshop maintains a temperature that is cool but comfortable, the kind of coolness that invites rest rather than discouraging it, the kind that draws you deeper into whatever warmth you carry with you, whether it be the warmth of a blanket or the warmth of your own slow, steady breathing. And speaking of breathing, let us attend for a moment to our own. Let us notice the gentle rise and fall of our chest, the quiet passage of air through our nostrils, the soft exhalation that carries with it the last traces of the day's tension, the day's effort, the day's accumulated concerns. Let us breathe as the workshop breathes, slowly and deeply, in rhythm with the ticking of the clock and the flickering of the lamp, and let us feel, With each breath, a little more of ourselves settling into stillness, a little more of the weight of the waking world lifting from our shoulders and dissolving into the kind and patient dark. The night outside the workshop window has deepened further, and the small panes of glass have become mirrors of a sort, reflecting the faint interior light back into the room in pale, trembling rectangles that lie upon the floor like patches of moonlight. Though there is no moon tonight, only the low clouds and the darkness and the distant, barely perceptible glow of the gas lamps along the lane. If one were to press one's face to the glass and look out, one would see very little. The wet gleam of the cobblestones, the dark shapes of the buildings opposite, the occasional passage of a shadow that might be a cat or might be nothing at all. The town has gone to bed, or very nearly so, and the streets belong now to the night and to whatever small creatures move through it on their own quiet errands. But we need not look out. The world beyond the glass is not our concern tonight. Our concern, such as it is this room, this lamp, this stillness, this gentle collection of objects and materials that form the working life of a man who fits stair runners and lays carpets, a man whose name is Jasper Motley, and whose trade is the ancient and honorable one of placing soft things upon hard surfaces, so that the feet of his fellow creatures may tread more comfortably, and the homes they live in may be made a little warmer, a little quieter, a little more beautiful. There is a dignity in such work, a dignity that does not depend upon grandeur or fame or the approval of the world at large, but that arises simply from the doing of a thing well, from the application of skill and patience to the materials at hand, from the satisfaction of knowing that the staircase one has carpeted will be walked upon by children and grandchildren, that the runner one has laid will soften the footsteps of a family for years to come, that the brass rods one has polished will gleam in the hallway light long after one's own hands have grown still. It is the dignity of the craftsman, of the maker, of the person who leaves behind not monuments or masterpieces, but the quiet, useful, beautiful evidence of a life spent in purposeful labor. And it is this thought, or something like it, that seems to fill the workshop now as the night grows deeper and the lamp grows dimmer and the room settles further and further into its own contented silence. The thought does not announce itself or demand attention. It simply exists as the carpets exist, as the tools exist, as the trestle and the chair and the clock and the mantel shelf exist, as a part of the room's atmosphere, a quality of the air itself, something that one breathes in without knowing it, something that enters the lungs and the blood and the bones and becomes, in time, a kind of peace. The lamp gives a small, final flutter, and for a moment the light brightens very slightly before settling back to its steady, minimal glow. It is the kind of movement that a candle makes when a door is opened in a distant room, a brief and barely perceptible disturbance in the air that passes through the flame and is gone almost before it has been noticed. The shadows in the room shift very slightly in response, leaning one way and then the other like tall grasses in a breath of wind, and then they are still again, and the room is still, and the night is still, and everything is as it was, and as it will be, until the morning comes and the daylight fills the small panes of the window, and the workshop stirs once more to life. But the morning is a long way off. Hours stretch between this moment and that one. Hours of unbroken quiet. Hours in which the clock will tick and the lamp will burn and the rolled carpets will stand in their patient rows, and nothing will change and nothing will move, and the only sound will be the small, domestic sounds of a building at rest, the occasional creak of a beam, the faint settling of plaster, the distant, almost subliminal hum of air moving through the narrow spaces between the walls. These are the sounds of patience, the sounds of things enduring, and they are as comforting in their way as any lullaby. Let us rest here a while longer, in this workshop, in this gentle dark, among these quiet companions of wool and brass and wood. Let us sit in our imagination in the chair beside the cold fireplace, with the faded green cushion beneath us and the mantel shelf above, and let us close our eyes and listen to the room, to the clock, to the lamp, to the silence between the sounds, and let us feel the night drawing itself around us like the softest and most beautiful of carpets, warm and dense and richly patterned with the colors of rest. The wool is patient. The brass is patient. The wood is patient. The darkness is patient. And we, too, may be patient, may allow ourselves the extraordinary luxury of needing nothing, wanting nothing, doing nothing, being nothing but a quiet presence in a quiet room, breathing slowly, thinking softly, drifting gently toward whatever kind of rest the night has chosen to offer us. In the morning, Mr. Motley will return. He will push open the dark wooden door and step into the workshop and hang his coat upon the hook behind the door, and he will turn up the lamp and light a fresh fire in the grate and put the kettle on the small spirit stove that sits on the shelf beside the window. He will take his leather notebook from the breast pocket of his waistcoat and open it to the page where he has written the measurements for the Pemberton staircase, and he will read them over slowly, carefully, committing each figure to memory before he begins the day's work. He will take the brass rod from beneath their flannel cloth and carry them to the tool chest, where he will select his small hand saw, its blade fine-toothed and sharp, and his metal file, its surface worn smooth in the center from years of use. He will measure each rod against the figures in his notebook, marking the cutting point with a small line of chalk, and then he will saw through the brass with slow, steady strokes, the blade singing softly against the metal, producing a faint, high note that is not quite music but is not far from it, a sound that belongs to the workshop and to the morning and to the beginning of a new day's work. The cut ends of the rods will need to be filed smooth, and this Mr. Motley will do with particular care, for a rough end will catch upon the carpet and fray the fibers, and a brass rod with a burr will never sit properly in its bracket. He will file each end in turn, holding the rod steady with one hand while the other moves the file in long, even strokes, and the brass dust will fall upon the trestle in a fine, glittering powder, the color of ground ginger, and the workshop will fill with the faint, metallic smell of worked brass, a clean and not unpleasant scent that mingles agreeably with the ever-present smell of wool. When the filing is done, he will polish each rod with a soft cloth dipped in a little of the brass polish from the tin on the mantel shelf, working the paste into the metal with small, circular motions until the brass shines with that warm, deep luster that is neither garish nor restrained, but simply, quietly beautiful. And then he will fit the acorn finials, pressing them gently onto each end of the rod, twisting them until they seat firmly, and he will hold each completed rod up to the light and turn it slowly, examining it with that attentive, unhurried gaze that is the hallmark of his working method, And when he is satisfied that the rod is straight and smooth and true, he will set it aside and reach for the next. All of this will happen in the morning, in the daylight, in the living, breathing, working world that exists beyond the quiet of the night. But for now, none of it matters. For now, the morning is only a distant possibility, a faint brightening at the far edge of a long and gentle darkness. And the workshop is wrapped in its own deep stillness, and the carpets dream, and the rods rest, and the clock ticks, and the lamp burns, and the night goes on. And you too may go on into whatever rest awaits you, carried there not by effort or intention, but by the simple, natural weight of your own tiredness, by the gentle gravity of sleep that has been pulling at you all this while softly and patiently, the way the earth pulls at a falling leaf, asking nothing, forcing nothing, simply offering the ground as a place to land, a place to be still, a place to rest. The workshop will be here when you wake. The carpets will be here. The brass rods, the trestle, the chair, the clock, the lamp. Mr. Motley will be here, in his apron and his rolled sleeves, with his measuring tape and his chalk and his steady, capable hands, going about his quiet work in his quiet way, fitting stair runners and laying carpets and polishing brass and sweeping floors, one small, careful task after another in the long, unhurried chain of days that makes up a working life. But you need not think about any of that now. You need not think about anything at all. Let the thoughts drift away as the last wisps of firelight drifted away, as the sounds of the town drifted away, as the evening itself drifted away into the deep, soft, endless night. Let the workshop hold you in its quiet care, as it holds the carpets, as it holds the tools, as it holds the memory of every staircase ever measured and every runner ever laid and every brass rod ever polished within its walls. And as the clock marks another minute and another and another, and the lamp continues its faithful, fading vigil, and the darkness deepens into the most perfect and most merciful of silences, let yourself go, gently, easily, without resistance or regret, into the kind and waiting arms of sleep. Thank you so very much for spending this quiet evening here with us, among the rolled carpets and the polished brass and the gentle lamplight of Mr. Motley's workshop. It has been a true pleasure to share this stillness with you, and we hope that it has carried you softly toward the rest you deserve. If you have enjoyed this story and would like to hear more tales of this kind, you are most warmly welcome to stay with us here at Mystic Sleep Tales, where there will always be a quiet corner and a gentle voice and a story waiting for you whenever the night draws in and the world grows still. Sleep well, dear listener. Sleep deeply and peacefully, and may your dreams be as soft and as warm as the finest carpet ever laid upon an English stair.